pattern interruption, and regrounding yourself. So one of the things that can happen to people as you move through life and as you begin to get older, I'm past 30 now, so I've definitely experienced some of this myself, is that you get into a routine, you get into a groove of how to do things in your daily life. And that might be with the job, that might be with a relationship, that might be your lifestyle, your travel, your interests, or any other thing like that. And after a while, this groove just becomes normal to you. It doesn't occur to you that there's more out there than what you're doing now or what you're familiar with. However, eventually everyone goes through transition points in your life. Maybe that's the loss of something. Usually these are catalyzed by the loss of something, because loss gives us a reason to change. It also brings about a lot of pain, and that pain can cause you to reflect. It can also cause you to try to seek out ways of doing things differently that maybe you weren't considering before because you were too comfortable or you had become too complacent with how things were before. And so a loss can often give you an opportunity to do a big pattern interruption. I'm here out in Red Rock, outside of Vegas, in the mountains and in the desert. And this is a pretty, novel environment for me. I've been to Vegas before, but I've never actually explored the natural area surrounding. And you can just see, the video really doesn't do it justice, how majestic this place is and how godly and how incredible it just seems to be here. And most human beings have access to something like this, especially if you're in the United States. You have access to places like this all over, but we don't take advantage of it. And the reason we don't take advantage of it is because, or at least most of us, is because we are stuck in our daily lives. We live in a city, or we live in a suburb, or even people that live in the country tend not to just move around very much. And so it actually takes a good amount of intention and a good amount of determination and a sense of agency and a sense of adventure and almost a Faustian spirit to go out and decide that you're going to actually take advantage of the natural richness and natural wealth that surrounds you and experience awe, experience nature in its full majesty. But a breakup or a loss or a career transition or something else in your life can often be the catalyst for doing a large pattern interruption. And one thing to do when these pattern interruptions occur, when these breakages occur, that challenge your sense of identity, your sense of self, your sense of reality, is to go out into nature, go out into places that are bigger than yourself and that are also real. They're concrete in the sense that they're not human constructions, they're not abstractions, they're not designed, manufactured spaces by human beings that are meant to give you a certain kind of experience. Ironically enough, we're only about 35 minutes out of arguably one of the most artificial and manufactured experiences in human history, which is Las Vegas itself. Las Vegas is an entire city that's essentially just a construction, a complete false construction, something that could never exist on its own in nature. There's really no reason for there to be so many people there. When you go to Vegas, you're getting all kinds of food and all kinds of materials imported from places where, none of that could be supported by this local environment. And so it's interesting to see the contrast where just outside of the city, you have all this amazing, incredible nature, this real harsh environment. You've got these desert plants here and the sparse animals that exist, the jackrabbits and mule deer and things like that. There's even like jaguars and things like that around here, or bobcats rather. And it's an interesting contrast because you've got on the other side, just a few miles down the highway here, you've got one of the biggest false constructions in the world. And so you can start to see, though, when you go through an experience like this and you go into a place like this that's a harsh environment, an open environment, nothing here is constructed. To an extent, it has been framed in that there are trails, there are paths, there are overlooks. We're at an overlook right now that are designed to sort of make this harsh environment a little bit more accessible to human beings. Even the roads themselves obviously would never be here in any kind of state of nature. But the nature itself and the harsh environment reminds you who you are, right? Who are you really? Your ancestors are the kind of people who came to environments just like this one and found a way to survive and eventually thrive in them, to the point where you and I can come here as tourists and, drive on the nice roads and be in the comfort of our cars and go to the side of the road and film a video just like this one with our modern technology, only because our ancestors fought through the elements, fought through the wilderness, and carved out of pure will and determination, they carved out a life for themselves out of the harsh environment that was the world. And you are from the same stock of people that came and did that. And everything that's around you was created by the same stock of people that fought that through. And so one of the things that it's good to reground yourself in, one of the reasons why it's good to reground yourself in nature like this, is that it reminds you who you are. It reminds you that you have the capacity to go into an environment like this. And, probably most of us, especially if you were raised in a city, you don't have experience at the outside too much. Most of us were raised in environments where you weren't given, from birth, the skills to survive in the wild. But in principle, you could. And if you really spent some time learning how to do that, you could eventually figure it out. And you'd be way more self-sufficient than you are now, and way more self-sufficient than you think and than you could possibly imagine. So taking a break to just get out into a place like this, a beautiful place like this, gives you the opportunity to remember who you are, but also to remember what life is really about. I mean, this majestic experience that I'm witnessing now, I'm out here on a trip with my father, dealing with, the fallout of a relationship that just ended. And you get to remember that this is really what life is about. That staring at computer screens, all the social intrigues and parties and going out and all those other things. Yes, we are social animals, and so it's by our nature to want to be around one another. And there is such things as hierarchies and status, and all of that is very, very important. To be a human being and to be a thriving human being, you must be part of various kinds of communities, various kinds of polities, and there's really no escaping that unless you really want to just become an antisocial hermit and go live on your own, in the woods. But that's not really the life for most people, and I would say that it's not really a good life. However, those things are merely a means to an end. The reason why you engage in political intrigues, the reason why you engage with other people, why you have relationships, why you do the work that you do, and why you live where you live, is a means for you to be able to enjoy the kind of life that you want to have, right? It's not the end in itself. Those things are not the end in itself. The money that you make, the status that you achieve, the career that you have, even the people that you know, are not ends in themselves. The end is this. The end is being able to experience a divine connection to the transcendence of humanity, and to understand yourself as one part in the greater whole, a whole that is so much larger and so much more unfathomable than you could possibly imagine, but of which you are still a part. And in fact, your experience, your subjective experience as a single human being, is a microcosm of this entirety of the whole. And so nothing about you is apart from this nature, and yet this nature is imposing upon you, right? Nothing about you back home changes how you feel when you get out here. Nothing that you've done, no one that you know, no one that you've dated or slept with or impressed, none of that actually matters to everything that's out here in the nature. And so it's important to keep that in mind, because one of the things that it can give you as far as a perspective shift when you do a pattern interrupt like this and you do a regrounding experience like this, like going into nature, traveling can be another form of this, although there are ways of travel that are more superficial than others. So a travel that's a real challenge, rather than you just simply going to the nicest hotels and nicest restaurants and being pampered and not really having to think through anything, can also serve a similar purpose. There are other things like, very intense sports or activities that force you into a kind of flow state. All of these things are ways for you to re-remember who you are and to re-remember what life is really about and what it is that we're here to do, which is become something greater than ourselves, and also to experience something greater than ourselves. And the nice thing about this is that it's not a hack. It's not like a retreat or an ephemeral kind of thing that you're just doing for social media or for the likes, or just to seem interesting. What these kind of experiences do is they reground you, they rewire you, they reconnect you to yourself. And then once you are ready, once you've taken the lesson, once you've taken the break and gone out and confronted maybe something more incredible, more vast, more awesome than you are, and more important than all these social relations and little intrigues and little games that people are playing, then you have an opportunity to actually take what you learned and bring it back to the community. The purpose of doing this is not to self-isolate and go out and again just become like some kind of hermit and just decide, oh, the world is too harsh, the world is too messy, it's too noisy, I don't want to deal with the world, and so I'm retreating. This is not a retreat. This is actually a strategic rest or a strategic restoration. This is not about exiting the world. This is about removing yourself from the world temporarily in order to reflect, in order to grow, in order to gain a new perspective and a new understanding, so that when you decide, when it's time to go and re-enter the world, you can come back into the world with a more grounded, more self-assured, more strong, and more eternal kind of perspective on things. Because now you've gone out and you've seen that this little bubble that you were stuck in, this little day-to-day life that you were in, is not the end-all be-all of everything, and that your life could actually be totally different if you just made a few different kinds of decisions. And so you get a reassessment or a re-ownership of your sense of agency, but it also lets you interact with that environment in a different way. So when you go back and talk to all your old friends, or you go back and engage with your employer, or you go back and you're back in the city where you're used to living, you now have an expanded perspective, and this makes you engage with that environment very differently. Because you know now that you've reminded yourself, you always actually knew this, but a lot of learning is actually remembering. You've remembered that what this is just some sort of broad social construction, and that the universe and the world and God is so much bigger than you are, and all of this nonsense that's around you. And this gives you a kind of weight, a kind of presence, a kind of groundedness that other people can sense off of you when they interact with you. When they see you, when you talk, when you move, and even the decisions that you decide to make once you go back are going to be different because of the fact that you've done this pattern interrupt, because of the fact that you've taken this perspective and you're coming back very, very different. And it doesn't even need to be an extended kind of trip. It doesn't need to be weeks or months or years long. In this case, I mean, this trip is only 3 or 4 days, but it's enough of a reset. It's enough of a change. Again, this video is about pattern interruption, that it presents a good opportunity to reflect, and it'll actually give you a lot of that agency and a lot of that self-ownership and perspective back. And you'll just come back a different kind of person, and you'll even start to expand your horizons within your local environment. This is actually very analogous to something that gets talked about in yoga, for example, called proprioception. So proprioception is literally the mind's understanding of the range of motion, or the sense of where your body is in space and time, right? So when you stretch, actually, a lot of what's limiting you in terms of stretching is not simply the fascia or the flexibility of the muscles themselves, but actually your brain and your nervous system doesn't understand that your body can move in certain ways. And so one of the things that you learn if you ever do any kind of extended yogic practice is that you can expand your understanding of how your body can move through expanding your social proprioception, through literally stretching yourself out and stretching your brain and stretching your nervous system. And then you get an increased range of motion, and part of that increased range of motion isn't just literally, expanding the muscles, stretching the muscles out, but part of that is actually your perception of your range of motion in and of itself has expanded. And this is a similar thing in that by going and doing new things, by going and doing challenging things, by getting into new environments, new strange environments that you're not familiar with, and then getting through them, you've now expanded your perception of what is possible. You've expanded your perception of your own range of motion within time and space as a human being and in terms of your lifestyle design. This is, again, why travel can be so important, why going and doing different careers can be important, why living in different cities can be important. All of these things expand your understanding of the degrees of freedom that are actually available to you in the real world. And as you get older and older, doing these kinds of things becomes more important because you tend to get into grooves very quickly or as you age, and it gets harder and harder to get out of those grooves because your life becomes more ossified, because you get more used to the patterns. If you've been doing something for 2 years, that's a lot different than if you've been doing it for 5 years, than if you've been doing it for 10 or 20. And so as you age, it actually becomes more important to go and do new things. We tend to think of young people as those who are adventurous or those who are changing things and picking up new hobbies and things like that. But actually, it's more important that as people get older, that they intentionally decide to put themselves in new situations and go and learn new things and meet new people and do challenging things, simply because you want to avoid that ossification. And the nice thing about this is that if you do this as you age, not only will you continue to grow and be dynamically interesting and develop and expand throughout your entire lifespan, but each time that you do that, you'll be entering into that environment with all of the prior knowledge that you've accumulated from your experience. And so this is not a purely linear function. It actually can exponentially increase your understanding of the world. You become kind of like the international man of mystery of sorts, because the accumulation of your life experience keeps growing and growing and growing, and in each new experience you bring in all of the knowledge, all of the wisdom and understanding of all of your prior experience, which boosts it even further, because someone that's young who's going out and doing all these things, they don't have that past history of knowledge, that past history of interesting and novel experiences. And so they're actually starting out very naive. They're starting out not understanding certain things. They're not connecting things back to prior understandings as much as well or as thoroughly as an older person would. And so not only do you have the advantage of constantly renewing yourself, of not getting stuck in your ways, of not getting ossified and continuing to grow as you age, but you also grow better. You grow in a way faster than even someone who's younger, because of the fact that you're carrying with you all of that prior knowledge. And so what I really want to leave you with today is that if you find yourself stuck in life, or you find yourself wanting to get a new perspective on things, then one of the best things and one of the most healthy things you can do is to create some kind of pattern interruption. And this pattern interruption should be a challenge. And ideally, it's not only challenging, but it's also something that takes you out of yourself, that lets you witness and experience something larger than yourself, something more awesome and majestic than yourself, and gives you a new perspective on life. And the purpose of doing this is not to escape the world, but so that you can come back to the world and re-enter it stronger and more grounded than you were before. This is Alex with Hacking State. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.